The iron gate slammed shut inches from my face with such force that I stumbled backward on the icy driveway. My bare feet hit the frozen concrete, and the shock of cold shot through my entire body like electricity. "Happy New Year, Mom. You're not welcome here anymore." Stephanie's voice cut through the December night air, sharp and final. I watched her silhouette retreat through the frosted glass panels of her front door. My daughter. My only child. The person I'd driven 2 hours through a snowstorm to see, wearing nothing but my silk nightgown and my favorite cashmere blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The electronic gate hummed as it locked into place. I stood there staring at the wrought iron bars, my breath coming out in white puffs. Through the tall windows of her Greenwich mansion, I could see the party inside. Champagne glasses catching the light, people laughing, music playing. My daughter was celebrating while I froze on her driveway like some kind of vagrant. It was 11:47 on New Year's Eve. 13 minutes until midnight. 13 minutes until a new year that I'd hoped would bring reconciliation. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, but it did nothing against the Connecticut cold. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees, and the weather forecast had warned about the worst winter storm in a decade. I should have worn shoes. I should have worn actual clothes. But when Stephanie finally answered my call after 6 months of silence and said maybe we could talk tonight, I jumped in my car without thinking, without planning, just desperate to see her. My Mercedes was parked on the street, 100 feet away. I'd have to walk past 3 neighboring houses to reach it. Houses with windows. Houses with people who might look out and see Vivian Aldridge, former CEO of Aldridge Cosmetics, former featured entrepreneur in Forbes and Business Week, walking barefoot in her nightgown on New Year's Eve. The humiliation burned hotter than the cold. I heard a car approaching, and panic seized me. Headlights swept across the street. Without thinking, I ducked behind the neighbors' garbage bins, pressing myself against the brick wall of their property. The cashmere blanket caught on the edge of a trash can, and I had to yank it free. I crouched there in the shadows, shaking, watching the car pass slowly by. This is what I'd become. 57 years old, $45 million in the bank, hiding behind garbage like a criminal. The car turned the corner and disappeared. I stayed crouched there, trying to gather the courage to make the walk to my car. That's when I saw him. An elderly man was huddled against the stone wall about 20 feet away, partially hidden in the shadows between streetlights. He was thin, wearing layers of ragged clothing that looked wholly inadequate for this weather. His shoulders shook with violent tremors. I forgot about my own misery for a moment. The man's lips looked blue even in the dim light. His hands were bare, tucked under his armpits. He wasn't moving toward shelter. He was just sitting there, shaking like he'd given up. People freeze to death on nights like this. I'd read about it in the news. Homeless people found dead in doorways after brutal winter nights. I looked down at my blanket. It was all I had, the only thing between me and the cold. If I gave it to him, I'd have nothing for the walk to my car, but he might die without it. I stood up, my bare feet screaming in protest against the frozen concrete. I walked toward him slowly, not wanting to startle him. As I got closer, I could see he was older than I'd initially thought. Maybe late 60s. His face was weathered and lined, but there was something about his eyes when he looked up at me. They were sharp, penetrating, not the dulled gaze of someone defeated by life on the streets. "Sir," I said quietly, "please take this." I unwrapped the blanket from my shoulders and draped it over him. The cold hit me immediately, vicious and unforgiving. The silk nightgown might as well have been tissue paper. He looked at the blanket, then at me. Really looked at me. His eyes traveled from my bare feet to my nightgown to my face, taking in the whole absurd picture I must have presented. "You're freezing yourself," he said. His voice was rough but educated, unexpectedly cultured. "I have a car close by," I lied. 100 feet felt like a mile right now. "You need this more than I do." He pulled the blanket tighter around himself, and I could see the relief in his face as the warmth started to reach him. We sat in silence for a moment. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. "Why?" he asked simply. "Because it's 15 degrees and you could die out here." "No," he said. "Why are you out here? Like this?" I let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Family drama. My daughter doesn't want to see me." "And you came anyway." "I came anyway." He studied me for another long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He stood up, keeping my blanket wrapped around him. He was taller than he'd appeared sitting down, maybe 6 feet, and there was a dignity in how he held himself that didn't match his appearance. "You proved your heart," he said. Before I could ask what he meant, I heard an engine, not a regular car, something powerful and smooth. Headlights appeared at the end of the street, and a vehicle that looked nothing like the family SUVs and sedans in this neighborhood rolled toward us. It was a Mercedes Maybach, matte black, the kind of car that costs more than most people's houses. It stopped directly in front of us, the engine purring like a satisfied cat. The back door opened and a man in an expensive suit stepped out. He was young, maybe 35, with the polished look of someone who worked in corporate luxury. He looked at me with professional courtesy despite my appearance. "Ms. Aldridge," he said, like it was completely normal to find me barefoot in a nightgown on a freezing night. "Mr. Castellano would like to speak with you. Please, come inside where it's warm." I stared at him. "I think you have the wrong person." Vivian Aldridge, former CEO of Aldridge Cosmetics, resident of Manhattan, currently parked in a silver Mercedes E-Class approximately 100 feet north of this location. "Is that correct?" My heart started pounding. How did he know all that? The elderly man I'd given my blanket to smiled. It transformed his entire face. "Please forgive the theater," he said, his voice losing the rough edge it had moments ago. "I'm Richard Castellano, and you just passed a test you didn't know you were taking." Richard Castellano. The name hit me like ice water. Founder and CEO of Castellano Technologies, one of the wealthiest men in America. Worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 billion. I'd seen him on magazine covers, but those photos showed an impeccably dressed titan of industry, not a man in rags shivering against a wall. "I don't understand," I managed to say through my chattering teeth. "I test people," he said simply. "Leaders, executives, people I'm considering for important positions. I create situations where they lose everything that usually defines them: money, power, comfort, dignity. Then I watch what they choose when they have nothing left but their character." He gestured toward the car. "Please, we'll talk inside. You're going to get hypothermia." I looked at the warm interior of the Maybach, then back at Stephanie's house. The lights still blazed. The party continued. She had no idea any of this was happening. "What kind of important position?" I asked. "The kind that could give your life new purpose," Richard said. "But first, let's get you warm. Then we'll talk." The suited man held the door open. Warm air spilled out of the car's interior. I could see heated leather seats, soft lighting, a world completely removed from the frozen nightmare I'd been living for the past hour. I climbed in. Richard settled into the seat across from me, still wrapped in my cashmere blanket. The suited man closed the door and the world went quiet, except for the gentle hum of the car's climate control. I held my hands up to the vents, feeling coming back into my fingers in painful tingles. "I've been watching you for 6 months," Richard said, "ever since you sold Aldridge Cosmetics. Impressive company. You built it from nothing while most of your competitors were inheriting family businesses or riding on venture capital. You did it through intelligence and ruthless work ethic. You've been watching me for 6 months, and you choose tonight to test me?" I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "The worst night of my life?" "I didn't choose tonight. You did. I've been monitoring your patterns. Tonight was the first time you left your apartment after dark in weeks. The first time you went anywhere that wasn't work-related since the holiday season started. I followed you because I was curious what would finally pull you out of your isolation. He knew I'd been isolating. He knew my patterns. This should have frightened me, but I was too cold and too exhausted to feel anything but numb curiosity. Who parks on the street in Greenwich if they can afford not to? He continued. Someone who doesn't want to announce their arrival, someone who's uncertain of their welcome. Then you came out of that house looking destroyed, hiding behind trash bins in your nightgown. Most people in your position would have just gotten in their car and left, preserved what dignity they had left. Instead, I gave away my only warm thing to a stranger, I said. Instead, you gave away your only warm thing to save someone you thought was dying, he corrected. There's a difference. You weren't trying to be noble. You just couldn't let someone suffer when you had the power to help, even when helping cost you dearly. The suited man, who'd taken the driver's seat, pulled away from the curb. I watched Stephanie's house disappear behind us. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere we can talk properly, Richard said. There's a private facility about 15 minutes from here. We keep rooms prepared for situations like this. You'll have privacy, warmth, clothes, and time to compose yourself. Then we'll discuss business. What kind of business? The kind that transforms lives, he said. But I need to know you're the person I think you are. Tell me about your daughter. Why did she shut that door in your face? The question hit deeper than the cold had. I looked out the window at the dark Connecticut landscape rolling past. Houses with lights in the windows. Families inside celebrating together. Because I earned it, I said quietly. Every bit of her anger, I earned. Go on. So I told him. Not because I owed him an explanation, but because something about the night had broken open a dam inside me. I told him about building Aldridge Cosmetics from age 28 to 55. About the 80-hour weeks. About missing Stephanie's childhood while I was in boardrooms and on international flights. About the countless school plays and parent-teacher conferences and birthday parties I'd skipped because I was building something. Building security. Building success. Building everything except a relationship with my daughter. My mother died in poverty, I heard myself saying. I was 25. She'd worked 3 jobs and still couldn't afford proper health care when she got sick. I watched her die in a county hospital, and I swore I'd never be that vulnerable, never be that powerless. So I built an empire. And your daughter grew up in that empire's shadow. She grew up in an empty mansion with nannies and drivers and every material thing she could want, except a mother who was actually present. I told myself I was doing it for her future, for her security. But really, I was just terrified of ending up like my mother. The car turned onto a private road. Trees lined both sides, lit by subtle landscape lighting. In the distance, I could see a modern building, all glass and clean lines. When did you realize what you'd lost? Richard asked. When I sold the company 2 years ago. I'd finally done it. Built everything I'd set out to build. Made enough money that 3 generations of my family would never worry about poverty. And I called Stephanie to celebrate. She didn't answer. Hasn't answered most of my calls since. 6 months ago, she got married to a surgeon named Derek. I wasn't invited to the wedding. That must have destroyed you. It should have, I said. But the worst part is that I understood. I looked at our relationship honestly for the first time and understood exactly why she didn't want me there. I'd missed too much, been absent for too long. You can't buy back time with money or apologies. The car stopped in front of the building. The suited man opened my door. Tonight was the first time she's agreed to see me in 6 months, I continued. She said maybe we could talk. I drove through a snowstorm in my nightgown because I thought maybe, just maybe, this was my chance. And she shut the door in my face, because I don't deserve anything else. Richard studied me with those sharp eyes. Most people would blame the daughter, call her ungrateful, point to all the money, all the opportunities you provided. Then most people are fools, I said. Children don't need opportunities. They need parents. I gave her everything except what mattered. He smiled then, a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Come inside, Vivienne. Let's talk about giving other people what matters. Let's talk about turning your biggest failure into your greatest purpose. I followed him into the building, still shaking from cold and emotion, with no idea that this disaster of a night was about to become the catalyst for everything that came next. The facility Richard brought me to was unlike anything I'd expected. A woman in professional attire met us in the lobby with warm towels, soft clothes in exactly my size, and hot tea. She led me to a private suite where I could shower and change. 20 minutes later, I emerged in cashmere loungewear that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, feeling almost human again. Richard was waiting in a conference room that looked more like a luxury living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked woods dusted with snow. He'd changed too, now wearing dark slacks and a fitted sweater. The homeless man disguise was completely gone. He looked exactly like the billionaire I'd seen in magazines. "Better?" he asked. "Warmer," I admitted, settling into a leather chair across from him. "Thank you." "Before we discuss the future, I need to understand your past," he said. "Tell me about building Aldridge Cosmetics. The real story, not the sanitized version you gave to Forbes." I wrapped my hands around the teacup, letting the warmth seep into my palms. I'd told the story of my company hundreds of times over the years. For investors, for interviews, for board meetings. But Richard was asking for something different, something true. "I was 28, I began, fresh out of an MBA program I'd put myself through while working 2 jobs. My mother had been dead for 3 years, and I was angry. Angry at a world that let hard-working people die because they couldn't afford medicine. Angry at myself for not being able to save her. So I decided to become the kind of person who would never be powerless again." "You started with $10,000 in savings," Richard said. He'd clearly done his research. "Every penny I had, I rented a tiny lab space in Queens and started developing skincare formulas. I'd studied chemistry in undergrad because I was fascinated by how things worked at a molecular level. I thought if I could create products that actually delivered results, products backed by real science instead of marketing promises, women would pay for them. And you were right. Eventually. The first 2 years I barely survived. I lived in that lab, showered at a gym down the street, ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. I tested formulas on myself until my skin was raw. Worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. I was obsessed. I paused, remembering those early years, the desperation, the drive that felt like it was burning me from the inside out. "Then I met Marcus," I continued. "Marcus Aldridge. He was an investor looking at small startups, handsome, charming, educated. He saw potential in what I was building. He invested $50,000 in exchange for 20% equity. 6 months later, we were engaged." "How long did the marriage last?" Richard asked. 17 years. Stephanie was born a year after we married. I was 31, and my company was just starting to gain real traction. Department stores were picking up my products. Revenue was climbing. And suddenly I had this tiny human who needed me. The memory of holding newborn Stephanie hit me with physical force. Those first few weeks when I'd tried to do it all. Be a mother, run a growing company, pretend I could manage both perfectly. "I failed at balance from day one," I said quietly. I told myself I'd take 6 weeks maternity leave. I made it 3 before I was back at the office full-time. I hired a nanny, then a second nanny, then a third for overnight care. I convinced myself that providing Stephanie with financial security was the same as being present, that working hard for her future was an act of love. But it wasn't enough. It was never about enough. It was about fear. Every time I held my daughter, I thought about my mother dying in that hospital. Every time I considered slowing down, I remembered what poverty looked like, what powerlessness felt like. So I worked harder, expanded faster, pushed further. I set down the teacup, my hands trembling slightly. Not from cold this time, but from the weight of memories I usually kept locked away. By the time Stephanie was 5, Aldridge Cosmetics had 300 employees and $20 million in annual revenue. By the time she was 10, we'd gone international. 50 countries, 2,000 employees. Marcus handled investments with the profits, building his own portfolio while I built the company. On paper, we were the perfect power couple. In reality, I barely saw my husband and saw my daughter even less. When did things fall apart with Marcus? Richard asked. When did I find out, or when did it actually start falling apart? I laughed bitterly. He'd been having an affair for 2 years before I discovered it, with his personal assistant, of all cliches. I found out when Stephanie was 15. She's the one who told me, actually. She'd seen them together at a restaurant when she was supposed to be at a friend's house. The memory of that conversation still stung. My teenage daughter, already so distant from me, having to tell me my husband was cheating. The look in her eyes that said she wasn't even surprised, like, of course this was happening, like of course our family was as hollow as it looked. I filed for divorce immediately, I continued. The settlement took 2 years to finalize. Marcus fought for half of everything, claiming he'd been instrumental in building the company. The truth was, he'd been an early investor and had made millions off his equity, but he hadn't touched the actual business operations in over a decade. My lawyers proved it. I kept 80% of the company. He got 20% plus some property holdings. And Stephanie? Took her father's side completely. She was 17 when the divorce finalized. She'd spent years watching me choose work over her, watching me miss everything that mattered. Then suddenly I was divorcing her father, and in her eyes, I was destroying what was left of our family. Never mind that he'd cheated. Never mind that our marriage had been dead for years. I was the villain in her story. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark woods. Somewhere out there, my daughter was probably toasting the new year with her husband and friends, celebrating without me. She went to Yale, I said. Full scholarship, didn't need my money, made sure I knew it. I attended Parents' Weekend her freshman year. She refused to see me. Didn't return my calls or emails. I kept sending money to an account I'd set up for her anyway. She never touched it. When she graduated, I flew to New Haven. She saw me in the crowd and turned away. I stood there in my designer suit with flowers in my hands, watching my daughter get her diploma, and she looked right through me like I was a stranger. That must have been devastating, Richard said. It was clarifying, I corrected. I finally understood what I'd done. Not intellectually, I'd known for years that I'd failed as a mother. But emotionally, standing there being invisible to my own child, I finally felt it. Really felt it. What did you do? Threw myself into work even harder. What else did I know how to do? I expanded Aldridge Cosmetics into new markets, launched 3 new product lines, worked 90-hour weeks. When I was working, I didn't have to think about what I'd lost, what I'd destroyed with my own hands. I turned back to face Richard. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not pity, something more like recognition. 2 years ago, L'Oreal made an offer to acquire the company, I said. $45 million. I'd spent 27 years building it. It was my identity, my purpose, the thing I'd sacrificed everything for. And suddenly, someone was offering to take it off my hands, to give me more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Money that would finally, completely guarantee I'd never end up like my mother. You took the deal. I took the deal, signed the papers, deposited the check. And then I sat in my Manhattan apartment, wondering what the hell I'd done. For the first time since I was 28 years old, I didn't have a company to run. No meetings to attend, no products to develop. No reason to wake up at 5 a.m. and work until midnight. That's when you tried to reconnect with Stephanie, Richard said. I called her the day after the sale closed, left a voicemail saying I'd finally done what I'd been working toward my entire adult life, and now I had time for what really mattered. Asked if we could have coffee. She didn't call back. I tried again a week later. Nothing. I sent flowers to her law firm for her 30th birthday. She had them sent back. I showed up at her apartment building once. The doorman told me she'd left instructions that I wasn't to be allowed up. Most people would have given up. I probably should have. Instead, I became obsessive in a different way. I hired a private investigator to tell me about her life since I clearly wasn't part of it. That's how I found out she was engaged to Derek Chen. Brilliant surgeon, good family, everything you'd want for your daughter. They were planning a small wedding. 75 people. I wasn't on the list. The humiliation of that discovery came flooding back, finding out from a stranger that my daughter was getting married, knowing I wouldn't be there to see it. I tried to reach out through Marcus, I continued, asked him to talk to her, to explain that I'd changed, that I wanted to make things right. He laughed at me, said Stephanie was an adult who made her own choices, and her choice was to have nothing to do with me. Then he hung up. Later, I found out he'd been encouraging her anger for years, reminding her of every time I'd missed a recital or forgotten a birthday, positioning himself as the devoted parent while I was the absent villain. Did she get married? 6 months ago. Small ceremony in the Hamptons. I found out about it after the fact from a photo in a society magazine. She looked beautiful, radiant, happy. Everything a mother should want for her daughter. And I'd missed it. Not because I was working this time, but because I'd earned my exile years ago. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. Not from the physical ordeal of the night, but from excavating these memories, saying them all out loud to a stranger. After the wedding, I stopped trying, I admitted. Stopped calling, stopped sending gifts, stopped showing up places hoping to run into her. I just existed, went to the gym, read books, took up meditation. Tried to figure out who Vivian Aldridge was when she wasn't building an empire or chasing forgiveness. Until tonight, Richard said. Until tonight. She called me yesterday. First time in 6 months, said she'd been thinking about things, about the new year. Asked if maybe we could talk. She sounded different, softer. I thought maybe enough time had passed. Maybe she was ready to try. So you drove through a snowstorm in your nightgown. So I drove through a snowstorm in my nightgown, like a desperate fool, I confirmed. Showed up at her door, hoping this was finally my chance to apologize properly, to start rebuilding what I'd destroyed. And she looked at me with such contempt, such pure hatred. Then she said those words and slammed the door. "Happy New Year, Mom. You're not welcome here anymore." Exactly. I met Richard's eyes. So now you know the whole pathetic story. I built an empire and lost my daughter in the process. I made millions and destroyed the only relationship that mattered. I became powerful and successful and utterly, completely alone. That's who you tested tonight. That's who passed your character assessment. A woman who sacrificed her child for money and is now reaping exactly what she sowed. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, his expression intense. No, Vivian, that's not what I saw tonight. What I saw was a woman who lost everything that usually defines her, dignity, comfort, even basic warmth, and still chose compassion. A woman who could have gotten in her car and left, but instead gave her only protection to save a stranger. That's not someone reaping what they sowed. That's someone who's learned from their mistakes. Someone who's been transformed by their failures rather than destroyed by them. He stood up and walked to a side table, picking up a leather folder I hadn't noticed before. I have a proposition for you, Vivian. One that could give your life new purpose. One that could transform your greatest failure into your most important work. Are you ready to hear it? I looked at this man who'd tested me in the cruelest and strangest way possible, who'd seen me at my absolute lowest and somehow still saw potential. I thought about my empty apartment, my empty days, my empty future stretching ahead with nothing but regret and money I didn't need. I'm ready, I said, and everything changed. Richard opened the leather folder and slid a document across the table toward me. I recognized it immediately as a term sheet, the kind of document I'd seen hundreds of times during my years building Aldridge Cosmetics. I'm creating a foundation, he said, the Castellano Foundation for Working Mothers and Children. $15 million in initial funding. The mission is to support women who are trying to build careers while raising children, to provide resources so they don't have to make the choice you made, so they can have both. I stared at the document, my chest tightening. That's incredibly ironic. Is it? Or is it exactly right? He sat back down across from me. Who better to run a foundation helping working mothers than someone who understands the cost of getting it wrong? Someone who knows intimately what happens when women feel they have to choose between financial security and being present for their children. You want me to run this? I want you to build this, the same way you built Aldridge Cosmetics, with the same passion, the same intelligence, the same ruthless determination. Except this time, you'll be building something that actually helps people avoid the mistakes you made. You'll be turning your failure into other women's salvation. I picked up the term sheet with shaking hands. The numbers were staggering. $15 million for startup costs, offices in Manhattan, full staff, comprehensive programs including childcare subsidies, flexible work consulting, parental leave advocacy, mentorship networks. It was ambitious. It was massive. It was exactly the kind of challenge that would have excited me 20 years ago. Why me? I asked. You're one of the richest men in America. You could hire anyone, someone with foundation experience, someone with a clean personal story, someone who isn't a cautionary tale about absent mothers. Because clean stories don't change anything, Richard said firmly. People with perfect track records create safe, conservative programs that maintain the status quo. I need someone who's been broken by this problem. Someone who understands it from the inside. Someone who has skin in the game emotionally, not just professionally. And if I fail? If I'm not the right person for this? Then you fail having tried to do something meaningful with your second act instead of just sitting in your apartment counting money and regrets. He leaned forward. Vivian, I've built 3 successful companies and made more money than I'll ever spend. None of it matters compared to the relationships I've built with my children. I have 4 kids. I was present for all of them, made it to every game, every recital, every parent-teacher conference. And you know what? It was harder than building billion-dollar companies. It required more discipline, more sacrifice, more actual work. Then why do you need me? Because I can't teach that. I got it right, so I don't understand from the inside what makes women get it wrong. I don't know the fear that drives someone to work 80-hour weeks. I don't know what it feels like to watch your mother die in poverty and swear you'll never be vulnerable like that. I don't know the specific traps that catch ambitious women and make them sacrifice their children for their careers. But you do. You know every single trap because you fell into all of them. The truth of it hit me hard. He was right. I did know. I knew exactly how it felt to tell yourself that working late was an act of love, that providing financially was the same as being present, that your children would understand someday, that you'd make it up to them later. All the lies ambitious mothers tell themselves while their children grow up without them. When would this start? I asked quietly. Immediately. We'll set up the foundation structure in January, hire staff in February, launch programs by March. I want this operational and helping real families within 90 days. That's aggressive. You built a cosmetics company from nothing in less time. This should be easy by comparison. He smiled slightly. The question is whether you're ready to channel that work addiction into something that actually matters. Whether you're ready to stop punishing yourself and start helping others. I looked at the term sheet again. Executive Director. $200,000 annual salary, which was laughable compared to what I'd made as CEO, but that wasn't the point. Full authority over programming and hiring, direct access to foundation funds, the ability to build something from scratch again, the ability to matter again. I'll do it, I said. Good. We'll start Monday morning, 9 a.m. The office space is already leased, 54th and Lexington. I'll have my team send you the details. He stood up, extending his hand. Welcome to the next chapter, Vivian. Make it count. I shook his hand, feeling something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Purpose. Direction. A reason to wake up in the morning that had nothing to do with trying to earn back my daughter's love. Maybe that was exactly what I needed. The first 3 months were a whirlwind that reminded me why I'd been good at building companies. I hired a staff of 12, all women who'd navigated the impossible balance of career and motherhood. We developed programs systematically. Corporate childcare subsidies, where we'd pay half the cost for on-site daycares if companies would provide the space. Flexible work consulting, where we'd help businesses restructure positions to allow remote work and flexible hours. Emergency backup care networks for when regular childcare fell through. Mentorship programs pairing successful working mothers with younger women just starting their careers. Every program we created, I thought about what would have helped me. What would have made it possible for me to run Aldridge Cosmetics and still make it to Stephanie's school plays? The answer was always systems, support structures, resources that remove the impossible choice between career and children. We launched in March with a press conference that got picked up by major media outlets. Forbes ran a feature titled "From Cosmetics CEO to Social Change, Vivian Aldridge's Second Act." The article was respectful, but didn't shy away from my personal story. They interviewed working mothers who'd already benefited from our early programs, women who cried talking about finally being able to afford quality childcare, mothers who'd been able to take their children to doctor appointments without risking their jobs. I cried reading those interviews, cried knowing I was helping other women avoid my mistakes. The foundation grew quickly. By June, we'd helped over 300 families. By September, we'd expanded to Boston and Chicago. Richard was thrilled. The board was impressed. I was working 60-hour weeks again, but this time it felt different. This time I was building something that actually helped people instead of just making money. But I still thought about Stephanie every single day. I'd stopped trying to contact her directly, but I followed her life from a distance. She'd made junior partner at her law firm. She and Derek had bought a house in Greenwich, the mansion where she'd slammed the door in my face. She was successful, accomplished, brilliant, everything I'd hoped she'd become, and she wanted nothing to do with me. Then in October, Derek reached out. His message came through LinkedIn, of all places. Professional, careful. He said he'd been following the foundation's work and was impressed. Said he wanted to discuss a potential partnership between his hospital and our childcare programs. Could we meet for coffee? I knew it wasn't really about the foundation. Sons-in-law don't reach out to estranged mothers-in-law about business partnerships. But I agreed anyway, because it was the closest I'd gotten to Stephanie's life in almost a year. We met at a cafe in Midtown on a Wednesday afternoon. Derek was younger than I'd expected, only 35, with kind eyes and an earnest manner. He ordered us both coffee and got straight to the point. "I'm breaking Stephanie's trust by being here," he said. "She'd be furious if she knew, but I can't watch her destroy herself anymore." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean, destroy herself?" "She works 90 hours a week minimum, hasn't taken a vacation day since we got married. She has anxiety attacks that wake her up at 3 a.m., She's on medication for stress-related hypertension. She's 32 years old, and her doctor is worried about her heart." I felt sick. "She's killing herself with work." "Just like you did," Derek said, not unkindly. "She swore she'd never be like you, never be the absent workaholic mother. But she doesn't have children yet, and she's already exactly like you described yourself at that age. Obsessed, driven, unable to stop. And she won't admit it, because admitting it would mean admitting you weren't the villain she's made you out to be." "Derek, I was the villain. I missed her entire childhood." "I know. She's told me every story at least a dozen times. The missed school plays, the forgotten birthdays, the business trip during her high school graduation. I know all of it." He leaned forward. "But here's what she won't talk about. She lost a pregnancy 4 months ago." The world seemed to tilt. "What?" "Early miscarriage, 8 weeks. She was devastated, took 2 days off work, then went right back to her 90-hour weeks. She hasn't processed it, won't talk about it, won't even acknowledge how much it hurt. And she definitely won't tell you because, in her words, you wouldn't care anyway. Tears were streaming down my face before I realized I was crying. My daughter had lost a baby, had suffered through a miscarriage alone. While I was across the city running a foundation for mothers, my own child had lost her chance at motherhood, and I didn't even know. "I'm sorry," Derek said gently. "I know this is hard to hear, but you need to know what's happening. Your ex-husband visits every week. He fills her head with stories about how you're just doing the foundation for publicity, how you're using it to rehabilitate your image. He's poisoning her against you constantly." "Marcus," I said bitterly. "Of course he is. He's broke, by the way, lost most of his money in bad investments. That's part of why he keeps Stephanie close. She's successful now. He needs the connection." "Does she know he's broke?" "No. He's very good at hiding it. Very good at maintaining the image of the devoted father." Derek pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was Stephanie at a family dinner, Marcus beside her, both of them smiling. But I could see the tension in my daughter's face, the tightness around her eyes. "She looks exhausted," I whispered. "She is. And she won't slow down because slowing down means thinking about things she doesn't want to think about. The miscarriage, her marriage, her relationship with you. So she just works harder." "What do you want me to do?" I asked helplessly. "She won't see me, won't talk to me. I can't help someone who won't let me near them." "I don't know," Derek admitted. "I'm just hoping that knowing the truth helps somehow, that maybe you'll think of something I can't. Because the foundation you're running, all those programs helping working mothers, they're amazing. But your own daughter is headed toward the same destruction you experienced, and I don't know how to stop it." We talked for another hour. He told me about Stephanie's panic attacks, about how she'd wake up crying and not know why, about the walls she'd built around herself that kept everyone out, even him, about how she'd created this narrative where I was the villain and Marcus was the hero, and she'd built her entire identity around that story. Admitting I might be more complex than pure evil would mean unraveling everything she believed about herself. When we parted, Derek made me promise not to tell Stephanie we'd met. I promised, but I felt like a conspirator in my own daughter's life, sneaking around to get information about her. It was pathetic, but it was also all I had. I went back to my office and looked at the photos on my wall, pictures of families we'd helped, smiling mothers holding their children, women who'd been able to keep their careers and their relationships with their kids because of our programs. I'd helped hundreds of families in 9 months, but I couldn't help my own daughter. That night, I made a decision. I was going to create a scholarship program in Stephanie's name. $2 million dedicated to supporting young women from families where mothers worked intensive careers. The scholarship would provide not just tuition assistance, but also counseling, mentorship, and family therapy resources. It would explicitly address the intergenerational trauma of absent parents and workaholic tendencies. I would name it after Stephanie without asking her permission. I would make it public. I would force her to see that I understood what I'd done to her, that I was trying to help other families avoid our pain. It was a risk. She might hate me more for it. She might see it as exactly what Marcus said, image, rehabilitation, and publicity. But I had to try something. We announced the Stephanie Aldridge Chen Scholarship Program on November 1st. The press release explicitly stated that the program honored my daughter, whose suffering taught me the true cost of unchecked ambition. This scholarship exists because I failed her. May it help other daughters avoid the pain mine experienced. The media ate it up. The story went viral. CEO creates scholarship named for estranged daughter, ran in the New York Times. Forbes called it a powerful act of public accountability. Working Mother magazine wanted to interview me, but the only response I cared about came 3 days later. A text message from a number I didn't recognize. How dare you use my pain for your PR campaign? How dare you make my suffering public without asking me? You don't get to do this. You don't get to turn your guilt into a publicity stunt. Stay away from me. Stay away from my life. I mean it this time. If you contact me again, I'm getting a restraining order. It was the first time Stephanie had contacted me directly in over a year, and she was threatening legal action. I sat in my office staring at that message for an hour. I'd known this might happen. I'd known she might react with rage. But seeing it in writing, seeing the depth of her hatred, broke something in me. Then my phone rang. Marcus. You've crossed a line, he said without preamble. Using Stephanie's name without permission, making her personal pain public. I'm speaking to my lawyer about options. Options for what, Marcus? It's a scholarship. I'm helping people. You're using our daughter for publicity. Everyone can see it. Even the positive press coverage calls it a public act of accountability. You're performing guilt, Vivienne. You're not actually sorry. You're just rebranding yourself. Is that what you told Stephanie? Is that how you explained this to her? I didn't have to explain anything. She saw through it immediately. She's not stupid, despite you treating her like a prop in your redemption story. I'm not trying to redeem myself, Marcus. I'm trying to help other families avoid what we became. We didn't become anything. You destroyed us. You chose work over family every single time. And now you're running a foundation pretending to care about working mothers when you were the worst example of one possible. It's disgusting. At least I'm trying to do something meaningful with my mistakes. What are you doing besides manipulating our daughter? The line went dead. He'd hung up. I sat there in my office as night fell over Manhattan. My staff had gone home hours ago. The building was quiet, except for the hum of computers and climate control. I looked at the scholarship materials spread across my desk. Applications from young women describing the pain of absent parents. Stories that mirrored Stephanie's experience. Stories I was trying to help resolve. My phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. Derek told me he met with you. I know everything. He thought he was helping. He doesn't understand that there's nothing to help. We're done. You and I are done. Accept it and move on with your foundation and your publicity and your new life where you get credit for caring about mothers. Just leave me out of it. So she knew Derek had talked to me, knew about the coffee meeting, probably knew about the miscarriage revelation. And she was angrier than ever. I'd made everything worse. I texted back, breaking my own promise not to contact her. I'm sorry about the baby. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry for everything. The response came immediately. Stop. Just stop. Your apologies mean nothing. Your money means nothing. Your foundation means nothing. You don't get to fix this. You don't get forgiveness. Live with what you did and leave me alone. Then, a final message. I'm blocking this number. Don't try to reach me another way. I'm done. I sat in that dark office and cried harder than I had since my mother died. Not quiet, dignified tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. I'd tried everything. Given away my only warmth to a stranger. Built a foundation helping hundreds of families. Created a scholarship in my daughter's name. Apologized publicly and privately. And all I'd done was push her further away. My phone rang again. Richard Castellano. I saw the news about the scholarship, he said, and I saw Stephanie's response on social media. She posted something quite harsh about you on her Instagram. I don't have Instagram. I don't want to see it. Probably wise. Vivienne, I'm calling because the board met today. We're thrilled with the Foundation's progress. The scholarship program is exactly the kind of bold initiative we hoped for. But I'm concerned about you personally. I'm fine. You're not fine. You just made a very public gesture and got publicly rejected by your daughter. That can't be easy. I knew it was a risk. Did you do it for the foundation or for her? I was quiet for a long moment. I don't know anymore. I thought I was doing it to help other families. But maybe Marcus is right. Maybe I was just performing guilt, trying to prove I've changed, using other people's pain to demonstrate I'm not the villain anymore. Or maybe, Richard said gently, you're a complicated person doing complicated things for complicated reasons. Maybe you're genuinely trying to help while also hoping for redemption. Maybe both things can be true. It doesn't matter. She hates me more now than she did on New Year's Eve. Give it time. You've planted seeds. You don't know what will grow. But I did know. I'd planted seeds in frozen ground. Nothing would grow there. My daughter had locked me out of her life permanently, and all my efforts to prove I'd changed had only confirmed her belief that I was selfish and manipulative. I'd lost her completely, and this time I had to accept it was final. 3 weeks passed in a blur of work and numbness. I threw myself into the foundation with the same obsessive energy I'd once given to Aldridge Cosmetics. We expanded programs to 5 more cities, helped over 1,000 families. The media coverage was overwhelmingly positive. Everyone wanted to interview the reformed workaholic CEO who was using her failures to help others. Everyone except my daughter. I'd accepted it finally, really accepted it. Stephanie was never going to forgive me. I needed to stop trying and focus on helping the people I actually could help. The scholarship applications alone were enough to keep me busy for months. Young women writing about their relationships with absent mothers, stories that gutted me every time I read them. I was in my office on a Tuesday afternoon in late November, reviewing applications, when my assistant buzzed me. "There's a Derek Chen here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment but says it's urgent." My heart jumped. "Send him in." Derek looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, his eyes red. He was still in scrubs from the hospital. He practically ran into my office. "I need your help," he said without preamble. "I found something. About Marcus. It's bad, Vivian. It's really bad." He pulled out his phone and opened a folder of documents, screenshots, bank statements, emails, legal documents. "I've been investigating your ex-husband for months," he said, hands shaking as he scrolled. After our last meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The way he visits so often, the way he always needs Stephanie's advice on business matters. So I started digging. "What did you find?" "He's not just broke. He's in serious financial trouble. He lost $8 million in a fraudulent investment scheme 3 years ago. He's been hiding it from everyone, including Stephanie." Derek showed me bank statements. Worse, he convinced Stephanie to put the Greenwich house up as collateral for a business loan 6 months ago. $3 million? He told her it was temporary, that he needed it for a can't-miss opportunity. My blood ran cold. The house I helped her buy. The loan is in default as of last week. The bank is going to foreclose in 60 days unless someone pays the full amount. Stephanie has no idea. She thinks Marcus paid the loan back months ago because that's what he told her. He's going to let our daughter lose her house? It gets worse. Derek swiped to a new set of documents. I found emails between Marcus and his divorce attorney from 8 years ago. "Vivian, he sabotaged you, deliberately, systematically." He showed me email after email, messages between Marcus and his lawyer discussing strategies to alienate Stephanie from me. Actual payment receipts to my former executive assistant, a man named Thomas who I'd trusted completely. $50,000 paid over 2 years to create fake emergencies and urgent meetings on important dates in Stephanie's life. "Your assistant was on Marcus's payroll," Derek said, his voice shaking with anger. "Every time you missed something important, every time you chose work over Stephanie, half of those times were manufactured. Marcus paid Thomas to schedule unmissable meetings during her graduation, her 16th birthday party, her high school awards ceremony. He created the narrative of the absent mother deliberately." I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin. He sabotaged my relationship with my daughter. For years. He needed her on his side for the divorce, and after the divorce, he needed her loyalty because he knew he was losing everything financially. Stephanie is successful now. He's been positioning himself as the devoted father so she'd support him when he eventually needed money. Does she know any of this? No. And she won't believe it if it comes from me. She'll think I'm trying to defend you, that I've been manipulated by your foundation PR campaign. Derek looked at me with desperate eyes. But if you present this evidence publicly, at the right moment, with lawyers present, he won't be able to deny it. And Stephanie will have to see the truth. You want me to publicly expose Marcus. I want you to save your daughter's house and show her the truth about who her father really is. She's going to lose everything in 60 days if someone doesn't pay that loan. And when she loses the house, she'll find out about Marcus's lies anyway, but by then it'll be too late. I looked at the evidence spread across Derek's phone. Years of manipulation, deliberate sabotage. My ex-husband had systematically destroyed my relationship with our daughter to serve his own purposes. He'd turned her pain into a weapon and used it to control her, and I'd believed I deserved all of it. I'd accepted the narrative of the absent mother because enough of it was true. Yes, I'd worked too much. Yes, I'd made terrible choices. But not every absence was my fault. Not every missed event was my failure. Some of it had been stolen from me. What do you need me to do? I asked. There's a gala for Stephanie's law firm next week. Big fundraiser. 500 people including major media. Marcus will be there as her guest. I convinced Stephanie to let me buy a table and invite some hospital colleagues. Derek met my eyes. If you're there, with lawyers, with this evidence documented and ready to present, we can confront him publicly. Force him to admit what he's done. Pay off the loan in front of witnesses so Stephanie knows her house is safe. She'll hate me for making this public. She already hates you. But this way, at least she'll know the truth. At least she'll be safe from him. Derek's voice cracked. I love your daughter, Vivienne. I'm watching her destroy herself with work and anger and unprocessed pain. She's becoming exactly what she hated about you, and she can't see it because she's too busy hating you. Someone has to break this cycle. Someone has to force the truth out. I thought about New Year's Eve, about standing in the freezing cold while my daughter celebrated inside, about giving my blanket to a stranger and meeting Richard Castellano, about building a foundation to help other families while my own daughter suffered. I thought about Stephanie losing a pregnancy and not telling me, about her working 90-hour weeks and having panic attacks, about Marcus visiting her every week, filling her head with poison while secretly destroying her financial security. I'll do it, I said. Get me all the documentation. I'll have my lawyers prepare everything, and I'll transfer $3 million to pay off that loan before the gala so we have proof of funds ready. Derek exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This might blow up spectacularly. Stephanie might never speak to either of us again. Maybe, but at least she'll be free of him. At least she'll know the truth. He stood up. The gala is next Friday. Black tie. I'll make sure you're on the guest list. Marcus won't know you're coming until you're already there. After Derek left, I sat alone in my office as the sun set over Manhattan. In 7 days, I would confront my ex-husband publicly. I would expose years of manipulation and lies. I would pay $3 million to save my daughter's house without her asking for help, and she would probably hate me even more for it. But Derek was right. The cycle had to break. The truth had to come out, even if it cost me everything. I picked up my phone and called Richard Castellano. I need lawyers, I said when he answered. The best you have, and I need them ready to go public with evidence of fraud and manipulation at a high-profile event in 7 days. What are you planning? He asked. I'm planning to burn down the lies my daughter has been living with, and if I burn myself in the process, so be it. Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. There's the Vivienne Aldridge I tested on New Year's Eve. The woman who gives away her only warmth to save someone else. Let's do this properly. I'll have my legal team contact you in the morning. I hung up and looked at the scholarship applications on my desk. All these young women writing about absent mothers and damaged relationships. All these families I was trying to help. It was time to help my own family, whether they wanted me to or not. The countdown to the gala began. The week leading up to the gala was the longest of my life. Richard's legal team worked around the clock documenting everything Derek had found. We had bank statements, email correspondence, payment receipts, loan documents, foreclosure notices, everything organized in folders with tabs and highlights, evidence that would be impossible to deny. I transferred $3 million into an escrow account controlled by my attorneys. The money sat there ready, waiting to pay off Marcus's fraudulent loan the moment we needed it. My lawyers assured me everything was airtight. Marcus wouldn't be able to wiggle out of this. But I couldn't stop thinking about Stephanie's face when this all came out. The shock, the betrayal, the realization that the father she'd idealized for years had been using her, manipulating her, stealing from her. I'd wanted to protect her from pain her entire life. Now I was about to cause her the worst pain imaginable. Derek called me Wednesday night, 3 days before the gala. "She knows something's wrong," he said, his voice tense. "She keeps asking why I'm being weird, why I seem nervous. I'm a terrible liar, Vivian." "Just 3 more days," I told him. "Can you hold it together for 3 more days?" "I hope so. Marcus came over for dinner tonight, sat at our table talking about how proud he is of Stephanie, how she's accomplished so much. The whole time I'm thinking about those emails, about him sabotaging your relationship with her, and I wanted to throw him out of our house." "Soon," I said. "This will all be over soon." Friday arrived cold and gray. I spent the morning at the foundation trying to focus on work but couldn't concentrate. At 2 p.m., I left early and went home to prepare. I'd bought a dress for the occasion. Black, elegant, understated, Armani. The kind of dress that commanded respect without seeking attention. My stylist came at 4 to do my hair and makeup. She chatted about the foundation while she worked, telling me how inspired she was by the scholarship program. I nodded and made appropriate responses while my stomach churned with anxiety. At 6 p.m., my driver picked me up. The gala was at the Plaza Hotel, grand ballroom, 500 guests. Stephanie's law firm had been planning this fundraiser for months. It was their biggest event of the year, and I was about to turn it into a nightmare. The car pulled up to the plaza at 6:45. I deliberately timed it to arrive after most guests would already be inside. I didn't want to stand around making small talk. I wanted to find Derek, confirm Marcus was here, and execute the plan. The ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, white linens, elaborate floral centerpieces. A string quartet played in the corner. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The kind of event I'd attended hundreds of times during my corporate years. But this time, my hands were shaking. I spotted Derek immediately. He was at a table near the front with several people in medical scrubs, clearly his hospital colleagues. He saw me and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Stage 1 complete. He was here and ready. Then I saw Stephanie. She was across the room talking to a senior partner from her firm, looking absolutely stunning in a navy blue gown. Her hair was up, showing off diamond earrings I didn't recognize. Probably a gift from Derek. She was smiling, laughing at something the partner said. She looked happy, successful, beautiful. And in about 30 minutes, I was going to destroy that happiness. Marcus stood next to her, his hand possessively on her shoulder. He was wearing an expensive tuxedo that he probably couldn't afford, playing the role of proud father. I watched him lean down to whisper something in Stephanie's ear, and she laughed, touching his arm affectionately. My chest tightened with rage. He'd stolen so much from both of us, and he was still doing it, still manipulating her, still using her. Not for much longer. I made my way to Derek's table. His colleagues greeted me warmly, several of them mentioning the foundation. I made small talk on autopilot while Derek leaned close and whispered, "My lawyers are in the side room." "Yours?" Same. They're ready whenever we are. After dinner service, before the speeches, maximum audience, minimal disruption to the actual fundraising. I nodded. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Dinner was served at 7:30. I barely tasted the food. Across the room, I watched Stephanie and Marcus at their table. She looked relaxed, enjoying herself. Marcus was holding court, telling stories that made their whole table laugh. The charming ex-husband, the devoted father, the liar. At 8:15, the law firm's managing partner stood up to introduce the evening's program. That was our cue. Derek caught my eye and stood. I stood too. Together, we walked toward the side room where our legal teams waited. Richard Castellano was there too. I hadn't expected that. "I wouldn't miss this," he said when he saw my surprise. "You're about to do one of the hardest things a parent can do. Tell a truth that hurts. I'm here for moral support." My head lawyer, a woman named Patricia who'd handled mergers worth billions, handed me a leather folder. "Everything's here. Documentation, payment authorization, prepared statements. We'll handle the legal aspects. You just need to be honest." "And brave," Richard added. "This is going to be brutal, Vivian." "I know." We returned to the ballroom just as the managing partner finished his opening remarks. I walked straight to the small stage where the podium stood. The managing partner looked confused as I approached, but I leaned in and whispered, "I need 2 minutes. It's urgent, about one of your junior partners." His eyes widened, but he stepped aside. I took the microphone. 500 people turned to look at me, including Stephanie, whose face went from confused to horrified in an instant. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. "I apologize for the interruption. My name is Vivian Aldridge. Some of you may know me as the founder of the Castellano Foundation for Working Mothers and Children. Others may know me as Stephanie Aldridge Chen's estranged mother." The room went completely silent. I saw Stephanie half stand from her chair, her face pale. Marcus grabbed her arm, pulling her back down. Derek stood and moved to Stephanie's side. "I'm here tonight because I recently learned information that affects my daughter's financial security and personal safety," I continued. "Information about fraud, manipulation, and years of calculated lies. Information that needs to be made public with witnesses and legal documentation to protect Stephanie from further harm." "What are you doing?" Marcus's voice rang out across the ballroom. "This is insane. Security, remove this woman." "I'm doing what I should have done years ago," I said calmly. "Protecting my daughter, even when she doesn't want my protection." Patricia and 2 other lawyers walked onto the stage with boxes of documentation. Richard Castellano followed, his presence immediately recognizable to most of the room. Whispers started rippling through the crowd. 3 years ago, Marcus Aldridge lost $8 million in a fraudulent investment scheme, I said, reading from my prepared statement. Rather than admit this to his daughter, he hid his financial collapse and began systematically extracting money from her through various manipulations. I nodded to Patricia, who projected documents onto the large screens positioned around the ballroom. Bank statements showing Marcus's accounts going from millions to nearly nothing. Investment records showing the losses. 6 months ago, Marcus convinced Stephanie to use her Greenwich home as collateral for a $3 million business loan, I continued. He told her it was temporary. He told her he'd repaid it months ago. These documents show that was a lie. More documents appeared on the screens. The loan agreement with Stephanie's signature. Default notices. A foreclosure warning dated 2 weeks ago. Stephanie was standing now, staring at the screens, with her hand over her mouth. Marcus was also standing, his face red. "This is a violation of privacy. This is harassment." "This is the truth," I said firmly. "The truth your daughter deserved to know before she lost her home. But it gets worse." I took a breath, steadying myself for the hardest part. "During our divorce 8 years ago, Marcus systematically sabotaged my relationship with Stephanie," I said. "He paid my executive assistant $50,000 over 2 years to create fake emergencies and unmissable meetings that would force me to miss important events in our daughter's life." The screens filled with emails, messages between Marcus and his divorce attorney discussing the strategy, payment receipts to my former assistant Thomas, specific instructions about scheduling conflicts for Stephanie's graduation, her 16th birthday, her high school awards ceremony. "I'm not claiming I was a good mother," I said, and my voice cracked slightly. "I worked too much. I made terrible choices. I prioritized my career over my daughter more times than I can count. But not every absence was my choice. Some of them were stolen from me by a man who wanted to ensure Stephanie blamed me for everything while seeing him as the devoted parent." Stephanie had gone completely white. She was staring at the screens like she couldn't process what she was seeing. Marcus started moving toward the stage, but 2 security guards blocked his path. Richard had arranged that in advance. "Marcus Aldridge manipulated both of us," I continued. "He turned my failures as a mother into a weapon to control our daughter. He created a narrative that served his purposes and used Stephanie's legitimate pain to maintain that narrative for years. And he was about to let her lose her home rather than admit the truth." I looked directly at Stephanie. Tears were streaming down her face. "I know you hate me," I said, my voice breaking. "I know you don't want my help. I know this public revelation is probably making you hate me even more. But I couldn't let you lose your house. I couldn't let him continue destroying you financially while pretending to be your protector." Patricia stepped forward with final documents. "As of 4 p.m. today, the $3 million loan has been paid in full by Vivian Aldridge. The lien on Stephanie Aldridge Chen's property has been released. Copies of the payment and release documents are being provided to Ms. Aldridge Chen's personal attorney." The room erupted. People talking, gasping, some standing to get a better view. Marcus was shouting something about defamation, about lawsuits, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos. I stepped down from the stage and walked directly to Stephanie. Derek moved aside to let me approach. She was trembling, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, just to her. "I'm sorry for doing this publicly. I'm sorry for every time I failed you. I'm sorry your father manipulated both of us. I'm sorry about the baby you lost. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry for everything." She just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. Then she turned to Marcus, who was being held back by security as he tried to push toward us. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Dad, is any of this true?" Marcus's face crumbled. For the first time, the charm disappeared. The mask fell away. "Steph, baby, you have to understand. Your mother was destroying our family. I was trying to protect you. Everything I did was to protect you from her." "You paid someone to sabotage her relationship with me," Stephanie said, her voice getting stronger. "You made her miss my graduation, my birthday. You deliberately created situations where she had to choose work over me so I would hate her. She would have chosen work anyway. I just made sure you saw it, made sure you understood what kind of mother she was. You stole from me." Stephanie's voice was shaking with rage now. "You used my house as collateral for a loan you never intended to repay. You were going to let me lose everything rather than admit you'd failed. I was going to fix it. I just needed more time." "You've been lying to me for years," Stephanie screamed. The entire ballroom was watching, but she didn't seem to care anymore. "Everything you told me about Mom, every story about how she chose work over family, how much of it was real and how much did you manufacture?" Marcus looked at me with pure hatred. "This is your fault, all of it. If you'd been a real mother, I wouldn't have had to do any of this." "No," Stephanie said firmly. "This is your fault. You're a liar and a manipulator and a thief. And you used my pain as a weapon for your own purposes." She turned back to me. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy from crying, but there was something different in her expression now, something raw and uncertain. "I don't forgive you," she said, "for the years you missed, for the times you chose work over me. I don't forgive that, and I don't know if I ever will." "I know," I whispered. But I need to know the truth. The real truth. Not his version. Not your version. The actual truth about what happened to us. She took a shaking breath. I need to know which absences were yours and which were his. I need to know where your failure ends and his manipulation begins. We can do that, I said, however long it takes, whatever you need. Derek put his arm around Stephanie's shoulders. She leaned into him, still staring at me with that complicated, painful expression. The house, she said finally. You paid off the loan. $3 million. You're not going to lose your home because of his mistakes. I don't want your money. It's done. The house is secure. Consider it partial repayment for the graduation I missed, the birthdays, the wedding I wasn't invited to. It doesn't fix anything, but it's something. I paused. And before you ask, this isn't a publicity stunt. I don't want credit for it. I don't want gratitude. I just needed you to be safe. Stephanie nodded slowly. Then she looked at Marcus, who was still being restrained by security. Get out. I never want to see you again. Stephanie, please, he started. Get out, she screamed. You're dead to me. Do you understand? Dead. Security escorted Marcus from the ballroom. He was shouting about lawsuits and defamation, but nobody was listening. The managing partner of Stephanie's firm was already making apologies to guests, trying to salvage the fundraiser. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Saw myself in her angry eyes, the same drive, the same fear, the same destructive patterns I'd spent decades perfecting. You're working 90 hours a week, I said quietly. You're having panic attacks. You're destroying yourself the same way I did. How do you know that? She looked at Derek accusingly. Because I recognize it, I said before Derek could respond. I recognize the fear that drives you to work yourself to death. The belief that if you just work hard enough, you'll be safe. You'll be valued. You'll be enough. I know that fear because I lived it for 30 years and it cost me everything that mattered. Stephanie's face crumpled. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to be different than you were. Neither do I admitted. But I'm trying to learn. And if you're willing, we could try to learn together. In therapy, honestly, without him poisoning everything between us. She didn't answer immediately. Just stood there crying while Derek held her and 500 people watched our family drama unfold. Finally, she nodded. Just once. A tiny movement. But it was enough. The gala ended in chaos. The managing partner eventually regained control and salvaged the fundraising portion of the evening, but most people left early. The story would be in the gossip columns by morning. Foundation CEO exposes ex-husband's fraud at charity gala. I could already see the headlines. I didn't care. Stephanie left with Derek without saying goodbye to me, but she didn't say we couldn't talk again either. In the wreckage of that evening, that silence felt like permission, like possibility. Richard drove me home in his town car. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? I'd just publicly destroyed my ex-husband and humiliated my daughter in front of 500 people. The fact that it was necessary didn't make it less brutal. You did the right thing, Richard said as we pulled up to my building. Did I? Or did I just make everything worse in a different way? Time will tell. But at least now everyone's working with the truth. That's something. I went up to my apartment and sat in the dark for a long time. My phone buzzed periodically with messages. My lawyers confirming everything had gone as planned. Board members from the foundation asking if I was okay. A few reporters requesting comment. I ignored all of them. At midnight, my phone rang. Derek. She wants to meet, he said without preamble. Tomorrow, neutral location, just the two of you. She has questions. Okay, I managed. When and where? Coffee shop in Midtown, the one on 53rd and 3rd, 10 a.m. I'll be there. I didn't sleep that night, just sat watching the city lights and thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, all the things Stephanie might say, all the anger she had every right to express. but also, maybe, the possibility of truth between us for the first time in years. The coffee shop was quiet on Saturday morning. I arrived 15 minutes early and claimed a corner table away from windows. I ordered tea I wouldn't drink and waited. Stephanie arrived exactly at 10. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept either. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. I'd never seen her look so young, so vulnerable. She sat down across from me without ordering anything. "I spent all night reading the documents your lawyers sent," she said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Every email, every payment receipt, every piece of evidence about what Dad did. I'm sorry you had to see all of that. Don't apologize. I needed to see it. I needed to understand the scope of his manipulation." She folded her hands on the table. 53%. That's how many of your major absences during my childhood were directly caused by his sabotage. Not all of them. Not even most of them. But 53%. I felt tears start to form. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he was doing that. I believe you. Because if you'd known, you would have stopped him. You may have been absent, but you weren't cruel. He was cruel. She took a shaky breath. My 16th birthday party. The one you missed because of an emergency board meeting in Tokyo. There was no emergency. Thomas created it. Dad paid him $3,000 to schedule a fake crisis that would require you to fly out immediately. Stephanie, I need to say this. I need you to hear what he took from both of us. Her voice was getting stronger now, angrier. My graduation from Yale. You told me you had a critical investor meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. That was a lie, too. The meeting existed, but it could have been moved. Thomas told the investors you were only available that specific day. Dad paid him $5,000 for that one. Why did he do this? I whispered. Because he needed me to hate you more than I hated him. Because as long as I saw you as the villain, I wouldn't notice he was a failure. A man who married a successful woman and spent his whole marriage resenting her for it. When you divorced him, he lost access to your success. He needed my loyalty to maintain his image of himself as the good parent. I'm so sorry. Stop apologizing. Stephanie's eyes flashed. You want to know what makes me angriest? Not what he did, what you did. The 47% of absences that were completely your choice. The times you missed things because you genuinely prioritized work over me. Because those times were real, Mom. Those times actually happened, and no amount of his manipulation changes that. You're right. My 10th birthday. You were in Paris for Fashion Week, meeting with department store buyers. Nobody forced you to schedule that trip during my birthday. You chose it, my middle school graduation. You were launching a new product line. Nobody sabotaged that. You just decided the launch was more important than watching me graduate 8th grade. Each example felt like a knife, but she was right. All of it was true. I was terrified, I heard myself say. Every single day, I was terrified of ending up like my mother. Dying in poverty because I didn't build something secure enough. So I worked obsessively. I built walls made of money and success and convinced myself I was doing it for you when really I was doing it because I was afraid. I know. Derek told me about your mother, about how she died. Stephanie's voice softened slightly. I didn't know that. You never told me. I didn't want you to see me as weak, as someone whose mother died in a county hospital because we couldn't afford better. I wanted you to see me as strong, successful, powerful. I just wanted to see you, period. I didn't care about power. I cared about having a mother who showed up. We sat in silence for a long moment. Other customers came and went. The barista made drinks. Life continued around us while we sat in the wreckage of our relationship. I lost a baby, Stephanie said finally. 4 months ago. Derek told you. I'm so sorry. I wish I'd known. I wish I could have been there. I didn't tell you because I thought you wouldn't care, that you'd send flowers and a card and go back to your foundation. But the truth is, I was scared to tell you. Scared that if you did care, I'd have to admit I wanted my mother when I was hurting. That I needed you, even though I'd spent years convincing myself I didn't. I would have come. If you'd called, I would have dropped everything. I know that now. After last night, after seeing you pay $3 million to save my house and publicly destroy your own reputation to protect me, I know you would have come. She wiped her eyes. You're different than you were. The foundation isn't just PR. You genuinely care about helping people avoid our mistakes. It doesn't fix what I did to you. No, it doesn't. But it's something. It's proof you're trying to be different. Stephanie took a deep breath. Derek wants me to go to therapy, with you. Family therapy to work through everything that happened. I'd like that, if you're willing. I'm not promising forgiveness, Mom. I'm not promising we're going to have some beautiful reconciliation where everything's fine. I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. There are wounds that might never fully heal. I understand. But I'm willing to try. To sit in a room with you and a therapist and figure out what actually happened to us. To separate your failures from his manipulation. To understand the full truth instead of the story I've been telling myself for years. That's all I'm asking for. A chance at truth. Stephanie nodded slowly. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. It was the first time she'd voluntarily touched me in years. Her hand was cold, trembling slightly. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared of becoming you. I work 90 hours a week. I have anxiety attacks. I can't slow down. Even knowing what it cost you, I can't seem to stop doing the exact same things. Then we'll figure it out together. How to break the cycle. How to be ambitious without being absent. How to build security without sacrificing connection. I squeezed her hand gently. We'll learn together. What if we can't? What if I'm too broken? What if we're too broken? Then we'll be broken together, trying to heal instead of alone, pretending we're fine. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. We sat there holding hands across a coffee shop table while people ordered lattes and checked their phones, oblivious to the fact that something profound was happening in the corner. A mother and daughter who'd been strangers were becoming something new. Not fixed, not healed, but maybe, possibly, on a path toward understanding. It wasn't the dramatic reconciliation from movies. There was no swelling music or perfectly resolved ending. We were still damaged, still carrying years of pain and resentment and fear, but we were together. Finally, honestly together. And that was enough for now. 1 year later, I stood in the same Greenwich driveway where Stephanie had slammed the door in my face. But this time, I was invited. This time, I'd called ahead. This time, when I rang the doorbell, my daughter opened it with a genuine smile. Happy New Year, Mom. Come in. It's freezing out there. I stepped inside the warm house. Derek greeted me with a hug. The table was set for 3. Nothing fancy. Just family dinner to celebrate the new year. We still went to therapy every week. We still argued sometimes. There were still hard conversations and painful revelations. Forgiveness was still a work in progress, maybe always would be. But I was in my daughter's house, invited, wanted. And somewhere in the city, the foundation I'd built was helping hundreds of families avoid our mistakes. I'd given away my only blanket to a stranger on the worst night of my life, and he'd turned out to be a billionaire who gave me purpose. I'd exposed my ex-husband's lies and saved my daughter's house. I'd risked everything to tell the truth. It hadn't fixed everything, but it had been enough to start healing. Dinner's almost ready, Stephanie said, leading me to the living room. Derek made his famous lasagna. Fair warning, he thinks he's Italian now. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. And for the first time in years, I felt something that had been missing for so long. I felt like I was home,